October 25th, 1415. The 100 Years' War. The English prepared to defend their positions against the French army in what would go down in history as the Battle of Agincourt. They're outnumbered 2-1, and they don't have nearly as many men-at-arms as their enemy. So how on earth did they not only win, but kill 10 times as many soldiers as they lost? The answer? 80% of the English army were archers who were already shooting at the enemy before it could even reach their lines. That was a humiliating loss for France, and a big victory for England, all thanks to a simple, elegant, and lethal weapon called the longbow. Hi, you're watching Wisey, and today we're going to talk about some of the deadliest weapons in history. Before we start, make sure to subscribe to our channel if you want to learn tons of stuff about anything and everything. So, where do we begin? Long before AK-47s were invented, people had to do with much simpler weapons, and to say that our beginnings were humble would be an understatement. Most archaeologists agree that the first ever weapon used by humans was stone tips. Then came bows and arrows, then spears and swords. But soon, people started thinking of ways to kill as many enemies as possible with one hit. Greek fire, circa 672. The first notable weapon of mass destruction was Greek fire, a highly flammable liquid used by Byzantine Greeks to burn down enemy ships. It could be catapulted in pots as a bomb, or sprayed under pressure like a flamethrower. This hellish thing could even stay burning on water. If you've watched Game of Thrones, you probably remember that green explosive substance called wildfire. Yeah, it was inspired by a real thing. To this day, no one really knows what Greek fire consisted of. The Greeks did a great job keeping the recipe a secret for more than 1,000 years. Still, some experts believe it was similar to napalm, which was invented almost 13 centuries later in 1942. This weapon was notably used during the bombing of Tokyo in 1945, where it killed at least 100,000, more than the death toll of Hiroshima. But back to medieval times. Landmines. In the 9th century, the Chinese made one of the most important discoveries in history, a mixture of sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate, better known as gunpowder. As they started thinking of some creative ways to use it against their enemies, they stumbled upon an invention: a mine. They put gunpowder in all sorts of things, from hollow cannonball shells to waterproof bamboo stalks. The main coordination for the explosive to work was to keep it dry, and the Chinese clearly knew how to do that because eventually they invented naval mines as well. This only goes to show that waging war isn't about having the latest fancy technology. Sometimes you need creativity. And what can be a better example of an evil genius than using the plague as a bioweapon? Plague, 1346. Yeah, you heard that right. In 1346, Mongols tried to seize the Genoese colony of Kaffa, now Feodosia in Ukraine. After a year, the plague started to spread among their men, and they realized it was a lost cause. But the Mongols wouldn't give up easily. They catapulted infected bodies over the wall, forcing the Genoese to flee back to Italy. That was the first example of biological warfare in history, and some historians believe that it may have directly brought the Black Death to Europe, where it claimed 25 million lives. Chilling. Let's lighten the mood with a little bit of a quiz. Can you guess how many years the longest war lasted? A. 421 years, B. 781, or C. 842? If you've guessed B, you're correct. The Reconquista was a 781-year period during which the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal fought against the Moors for control over the Iberian Peninsula. Now, can you guess how long the shortest war lasted? A. 1 day, B. 1 hour, or C. 45 minutes? And the answer is C. The Anglo-Zanzibar War happened on August 27, 1896, when one Zanzibari prince refused to accept Britain's preferred successor to the Sultan's throne. After he occupied the palace, the Brits opened fire on his position, forced him to surrender, and installed their candidate. All in less than 45 minutes. How efficient. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century. Fighter bombers, 1915. World War I was the first major military conflict that saw a broad use of fighter bomber planes, even though aviation was still in its infancy at the time. These aircraft could only carry small bombs, but nonetheless they helped the Allies gain air superiority over the Germans, who favored Zeppelins, which were much more difficult to navigate. These early fighter jets were also equipped with machine guns to shoot down enemy planes. Now time for our Wisey facts of the day. For every successful invention, there's always a bunch of ridiculous ones. I mean, just take a look at this crazy looking thing. A gun with a fold-out knife and brass knuckles. Talk about bringing a knife to a gunfight. This is an Apache revolver named after infamous gangs who terrorized the streets of Paris in the early 20th century. Unsurprisingly, this weapon turned out to be useless in combat, as it was difficult to aim and reload. I guess some things weren't meant to go together, but you gotta admit, it does look kinda cool. By the way, can you guess the most ridiculous reason that led to a full-blown war? It was pastry. Long story short, the Mexican government refused to reimburse a French chef whose cafe was looted during civic unrest in Mexico City. France demanded 3 million francs in damages, but was denied. And that's how the first French intervention in Mexico started, aka the Pastry War. Back to the serious stuff. Let's finally discuss the most deadly weapon used to this day, the dreaded nuclear bomb. Nuclear bomb, 1945. Everyone is afraid of it, but few actually know how it works. Basically, an atom bomb uses nuclear fission, the splitting of the atom into 2 or more pieces to produce a high-energy blast. In all of history, these types of weapons have only been used twice, during the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II. According to the most modest estimates, the nukes killed at least 110,000 people, while anti-nuclear scientists and the Japanese government state that the death toll was almost twice as high, 210,000. The second number factors in the people who died much later due to the effects of radiation poisoning. Still, even the lower estimates are horrific enough, and considering how many lives were taken by just those 2 bombs, it would be hard to imagine anything worse than that. Except there is. The type of nuclear weapon we've just described was your basic atom bomb, which is nothing compared to the thermonuclear one. This bomb detonates through the fusion of 2 or more atoms into a single large one. And it's impossible to overstate how dangerous this is. The biggest thermonuclear bomb known to man was the Tsar Bomba, developed and tested by the USSR during the Cold War. With a blast yield of 50 megatons, it was 3,000 times more powerful than the atom bomb Little Boy, which was dropped on Hiroshima. Thankfully, thermonuclear weapons have never actually been used in war, and let's hope they never will be. After all, the world has already seen enough suffering. 108 million people have died in wars in the 20th century alone. The deadliest one was, of course, World War II, which took the lives of over 70 million, about 3% of the Earth's population at that time. And we don't want to see history repeating itself. What does the future hold? Still, with all these new technologies, you have to wonder, what will the weapons of the future look like? For example, can you create a virus that only kills specific people while using others as carriers without harming them? If you've seen the latest Bond film, No Time to Die, you'll know what we're talking about. In the movie, a supervillain played by Rami Malek creates nanobots that can be programmed to target specific individuals and their families, spreading from person to person through contact like a virus until they reach their destination. In the end, Bond saves the day, and that nanobot factory is destroyed. But what are we gonna do if this kind of weapon becomes reality? Let's just hope it will be used to kill dictators and other evil people. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more interesting content about anything and everything. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.